now, Russia is losing Crimea. The fiery fist of the Ukrainian armed forces is already prepared. The trap is snapping shut. The enemy cannot escape. High-value targets on the peninsula, Kremlin is in a panic. Urgently, the Ukrainian armed forces and the West are preparing a shocking operation against the Kremlin. Weapons are pouring in, the roar of airplanes fills the air. For Ukraine, they inspire panic and fear among the occupiers. The Russian army will not survive this strike. A historic rout for the enemies. The cauldrons with Russians are burning. The Ukrainian armed forces have managed to crush Putin's army in Dobropillia. Drones, missiles, and blackouts. Both the US and Ukraine are preparing a powerful strike tsunami against the Kremlin. Sensations from secret negotiations, a classified shipment from the US and military railways, Denmark enters the war with Russia. No one expected this. America is shaken. The shutdown has paralyzed Washington. Budget disputes between Republicans and Democrats are putting arms supplies for the Ukrainian armed forces at risk. And Trump himself could be ousted in the near future. Ukraine is on the verge of exploding. Hungary is sitting on a powder keg and tensions are rising every day. The countries are moving toward a dangerous line, especially in Zakarpattia. Orban made an unexpected statement. A diplomatic break or something more? What happens next? All this in our episode of Hotspot. A fiery surprise from Ukraine. Occupied Crimea is under the crosshairs for demilitarization of the occupiers, and the process is in full swing. A special operation is being prepared. This will happen in the near future. The naval landing force is already at the starting line. Russian air defense won't save them. Missile power and iron birds are striking with precision. Where exactly will Ukraine direct its fiery fist? And should Putin be worried about the fate of the Crimean bridge? Watch right now.
Ukraine may attack Crimea. Such a bold statement was made by Sky News analyst Michael Clark. And we're not talking about the usual strikes that the defense forces carry out almost every day, but about a large-scale one. According to Clark, Ukraine may carry out an airstrike or an amphibious landing against Russian positions in Crimea. And in his opinion, this will happen before winter.
Ukrainians love to deliver surprises. They know that this affects not only Russia on the front line, but also the West's perception of how things are going in Ukraine.
The Sky News analyst also believes that given Ukraine's long-range strike capabilities, an attack on the Kerch Bridge cannot be ruled out.
You can create a gap in the air defense curtain, and then you'll want to put something through it to achieve something even more valuable.
Ukraine has attacked the Kerch Bridge 3 times. In 2022, a truck loaded with the equivalent of 20 tons of explosives was used to strike the crossing. In 2023, the bridge was attacked by combat maritime drones, and in 2025, the Security Service of Ukraine blew up the Kerch Bridge underwater. Explosives were planted near the key supports. And while the analyst's suggestion of a 4th attack seems encouraging, official Kyiv is not thrilled about it.
Of course, there's no need to write about this today. These are somewhat different stages of the war, and in general, there's no need to announce intentions in a war that has been going on for almost 4 years. Russia is still investing significant resources in countering Ukraine. We see everything they are doing. I will not comment on offensive operations. That's not entirely appropriate.
Experts and the military are also against such loud statements. There is indeed ongoing work regarding Crimea. Demilitarization is in full swing. But that's all. What do you need to know?
This is the personal opinion of a private individual who has no
connection to the actual state of affairs. The only thing that can be said about such a publication is that it emphasizes that Crimea is a temporarily occupied Ukrainian peninsula. Not only has it not disappeared from the agenda for our country's defense forces, but it is now under active consideration. And right now, there is an active phase of demilitarization of temporarily occupied Crimea underway. All these so-called analytical calculations and forecasts have nothing whatsoever to do with the current realities. The reality now is that the defense forces structures, in particular the main directorates of Ukraine, the Security Service of Ukraine, the naval forces of the armed forces of Ukraine, and other related structures, are carrying out the necessary work.
This work consists of constant targeted operations to destroy Russian radar systems, air defense installations, aircraft, and so on. All of this is something Ukrainians can witness almost every day. And such methodical destruction of Russian weaponry is not happening by accident. This is confirmed by the spokesperson for the naval forces, Dmytro Pletenchuk, in court. This is exactly where it all begins.
If you want to influence the enemy, whether on their territory or on your own territory that the enemy has occupied, the first thing you need to do is eliminate all obstacles. This will allow you to gain air superiority, which in turn means superiority on the ground as well. To achieve this, you need to get rid of enemy countermeasures, in other words, destroy their air defense systems. That's why it's the top priority target, and every other action starts from there.
But what exactly the next action will be, there's no need to know that. Speculation won't do any good either, especially from Western analysts. There's no need to interfere with the work of the defense forces. And that's a rule Ukrainians have learned well after almost 4 years of full-scale war.
Apocalypse over Russia. The West is arming Kyiv to the teeth. Ukraine's formidable reinforcements are changing the course of the war forever. Moscow's hysteria can be heard on the other side of the world. The roar of aviation and a stream of deadly weapons. Ukraine is preparing a strike from which the Kremlin will not recover. All the details are coming up in the report.
To defend more effectively and attack with greater results. The Ukrainian General Staff has confirmed the upcoming transfer of an additional batch of Western fighter jets to the armed forces of Ukraine. In addition, new deliveries of Patriot systems are expected from several allies at once. This fall, Ukraine definitely does not intend to leave Moscow's strikes unanswered.
It will significantly expand in size.
Obviously, the air fleet of the Air Force will grow, as will our capabilities. This is important.
Oh dear.
The fact that Kyiv is preparing to receive several types of new aircraft at once was revealed in an interview with the BBC by Ukraine's first Deputy Defense Minister, Lieutenant General Ivan Havrilyuk. They clarified,
With Havrilyuk when the next deliveries would take place. He replied, "We said, when you see them in the skies over Ukraine, then you'll know." Bravo. A very good and correct answer, so that neither the enemy understands nor knows, but also so that there are no expectations here. A clear, normal, practical and pragmatic position. They will be in the air carrying out combat missions, and we will see.
the only thing Havrilyuk revealed was the models of the upcoming reinforcements. So we're talking about a new batch of F-16S, French Mirage 2000S and Swedish Gripens.
These are indeed highly effective and very powerful fifth-generation aircraft, developed by the innovative Swedish industry with the explicit goal of effectively countering and successfully resisting a stronger, better resourced adversary.
Analysts explain that given the number of sorties flown by Ukrainian aviation, the issue of maintainability is far from the least important. It is also extremely important that the pylons can accommodate Ukrainian as well as European and American weaponry. After all, supplies to Ukraine are now coming from all over the world, and the Gripen meets these requirements.
The Swedish army is ready by next year to provide an entire air fleet to counter Russian aggression accordingly. And the aircraft designers who developed it, I'm talking about the JS-39, made it specifically easy to repair, relatively inexpensive and multifunctional.
At the same time, in terms of maneuverability, it is head and shoulders above all Soviet aircraft and many Western ones, which will give our pilots a clear advantage when operating directly near the front line. Another addition to Ukraine's air forces will be the French Mirages. This is equipment already familiar to our pilots and especially often used for long-range strikes with Scalp and Storm Shadow missiles.
Bombs, missiles, a huge arsenal. Moreover, they can be equipped with external fuel tanks, so the payload weight can be reduced if increased range is required. Or if you simply need to fly for a long time, for example, to intercept something or for patrolling.
At the same time, analysts say these aircraft are also effective during large-scale operations. The point is that French fighters have an advanced data transmission system between aircraft which allows them to carry out missions more efficiently as part of a group.
It can communicate with AWACS systems, and thanks to this, it can see much more, so the shortcomings of its own radar are not really compensated for. And the ability to create three-dimensional objects on the display makes ground attacks and low-altitude maneuvers easier. However, it should be noted that Mirages are specifically designed to operate as part of a team. They exchange information with each other, with ground-based radars, and with SISTA. At the same time,
In addition to more effective strikes, Ukraine will also be able to defend itself more efficiently. According to President Volodymyr Zelensky, at the end of the summer, Israel provided us with an additional Patriot air defense system. 2 more systems are already on their way.
The system has been operating in Ukraine for a month. We will receive 2 Patriot systems in the fall. All right, that's it. I won't say anything more about the Patriot.
However, the German Defense Minister Boris Pistorius was quite willing to talk. He unequivocally confirmed that it is indeed the German capital Berlin which is meticulously handling the crucial delivery of advanced Patriot air defense systems to Ukraine, a nation in urgent need of robust defensive capabilities. Furthermore, he specified that the comprehensive package of additional weaponry being provided today prominently includes powerful American-made Tomahawk cruise missiles, significantly bolstering the defensive arsenal. The Institute for the Study of War stated that Moscow is already trying to disrupt these deliveries, claiming in response that it might deploy its own Oreshnik in Venezuela. However, according to rumors from Washington, these threats have had no effect on the White House, and
on the front, Russians are burning in cauldrons as Ukrainian defenders crush the enemy. The Kremlin is in complete shock. This is a historic breakthrough. The Dobropilsky salient of the occupiers has been cut off. The enemy's losses are colossal. Breaking news, the US is providing Ukraine with secret intelligence. Strikes on Russia's energy sector are inevitable. Watch all the latest news from the front and beyond right now.
US President Donald Trump has approved the transfer of intelligence to Ukraine for targeting airstrikes on energy infrastructure deep inside Russia. This was reported by sources for the Wall Street Journal and later confirmed by Reuters interlocutors. Journalists write that the intelligence being provided is not just for long-range airstrikes, but also for missile strikes. The article suggests that the next step for the Trump administration could be agreeing to supply Kiev with more powerful weapons that would allow them to hit more targets inside Russia.
The Trump administration announced the transfer of 3,300 Rams to the Ukrainian side. Their technical specifications include a range of over 450 kilometers. Let me remind you that during the entire term of the Biden administration, no more than 108 ACMS units were delivered to Ukraine's defense forces. Their technical specifications are about 300 kilometers in range.
The blackout at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant lasted for more than 3 hours. The strike by Russian forces on the energy facility in Slavutik, which resulted in the Chernobyl nuclear power plant also losing power, was deliberate. This was reported by the President of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky.
It should be noted that strikes are being carried out not only on the power system supplying the Chernobyl nuclear power plant, but also that Russian drones have been spotted over the South Ukraine nuclear power plant. Moreover, the Russian Federation is periodically creating conditions for a man-made disaster at the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant. The actions currently taking place in the Chernihiv direction are what is known as the tactic of hanging threats, that is creating the impression of a possible escalation of hostilities in this area in order to divert the operational reserves of the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine from the main direction of the Russian occupying forces' attack.
The specifications of the Ukrainian cruise missile known as Long Neptune have become known. In particular, experts from Defense Express have reported the exact range of the missile and the weight of its warhead.
The Ukrainian side has already stated that the strikes in Belgorod were carried out using the Neptune missile. It should also be noted that the Ukrainian version completely refutes Russian reports claiming that the strikes were allegedly carried out using American weaponry. In addition, it is worth mentioning the successful use of the Neptune missile during the strike on legitimate military targets in the temporarily occupied territory of Crimea.
The testing and successful combat use of the R-360 Neptune missile, as the weapon is officially called, took place in March 2025. A Dutch F-35 fighter jet shot down a Russian Shahed drone. This is evidenced by a mark left on the aircraft's fuselage.
The extensive use of the advanced F-35 fighter jet to effectively neutralize Iran drones, which typically cost around $10,000 each, is not economically justified or a financially sound strategy. An hour of flight time for the F-35 costs about $40,000. Plus, the advanced munitions specifically used by the F-35 fighter jet, such as the sophisticated missile systems, can individually cost around a staggering $1.5 million, making them incredibly expensive.
Journalists suggest that, most likely, the drone was shot down in Polish airspace during the attack on September 10th. the Ukrainian defense forces have breached the so-called Dobropillia salient of the Russian Federation and are doing everything possible to inflict maximum losses on the Russian occupiers. This was written by the Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, Oleksandr Syrsky.
Over the past day, Ukrainian defense forces have advanced from 100 to 1,500 meters in the Dobropillia direction. These are significant tactical successes by our defenders. In addition, I would like to note that during the counteroffensive operation, Ukrainian defense forces have deoccupied about 170 square kilometers and cleared approximately 190 square kilometers of Ukrainian territory from saboteurs.
French special forces detained a Russian Shadow Fleet tanker off the coast of France that was circumventing sanctions to sell oil. However, sanctions were not the only thing the sailors were guilty of. The vessel was allegedly connected to recent drone flights over Denmark, according to the Telegraph. Denmark called the attack extremely serious, and it was directed at critical infrastructure. Since air traffic was disrupted, the Danes were even forced to close Copenhagen airport. Russia, for its part, as usual, denies any involvement. Subtitles editor N. Novikova.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism, and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine Today. Join us now.
Is Denmark preparing for war? The country is carrying out an emergency mobilization of reservists. Russia is the main threat. Secret weapons from the US are already in Copenhagen. From Denmark's military railways to secret negotiations in EU offices, how the West is preparing a response plan to new provocations from the Kremlin. Exclusive details right now.
Denmark is preparing for war, and it's all because of the increasing number of Russian drone raids on NATO countries. Hybrid attacks by Russia on Europe are happening more and more often, and now many countries are taking a series of measures. Denmark is no exception.
I would call this a hybrid attack using different types of drones. These are actions that could threaten our security and freedom. There is currently no direct military threat to Denmark.
The Danish Armed Forces Command has issued a secret order to call up some reservists. But there is no official data on the number of reservists at the disposal of the Danish armed forces.
They are gathered to check how they assemble, whether they are on the lists, to find out if someone has gone abroad or if someone has already passed away. They are assembled, checked for their condition and fitness, and then they undergo training sessions. They run, jump, and shoot. In other words, this is support, constant support to keep the reservists in a state of combat readiness.
So what about armaments? Recently, Denmark announced the purchase of European air defense systems for $9 billion, which is the largest arms purchase in its history.
Denmark has long been facing the issue of restoring its military potential, which was unfairly neglected, unfairly buried. This also applies to Norway and Sweden. They are once again revising their doctrines and their military bases, which were previously sold off.
But that's not all. The Danish government has also increased its military budget and announced the purchase of long-range precision weaponry.
Everything we hear about Denmark that they are buying something is because they need to make up for what was lost. They need to fill the gaps in armaments that they have already given to Ukraine to make up for the shortages caused by equipment that has broken down or been decommissioned. This is an attempt to be prepared for any turn of events that could happen literally next year or in 2 years.
But of course, the fact of arms procurement has affected Russia the most. There, the ambassador of the aggressor country called it pure madness and once again mentioned that Russia is being threatened.
For some reason, Russia is offended by everything. Anyone's words, any action. Russia takes offense. It has its own interests everywhere and sticks its long nose into everything. And when they hear statements that any other European country is investing large sums of money in its own armaments, it's clear that this is unacceptable for Russia. They would prefer to keep everything as it is. Europe is weak, Russia is strong.
Meanwhile, Denmark's press service announced a new military aid package for Ukraine worth more than 400 million euros. And in the country, ignoring more than 20 laws, they will accelerate the construction of a rocket fuel plant for Ukraine.
This is business, and once again it's focused exclusively on Europe with the idea that everything will be produced independently within Europe. Tanks in Germany, planes in France, rocket fuel in Denmark, and they will divide all of this among themselves.
Of course, Denmark is not the only country that takes the Kremlin's provocations seriously. NATO is creating a rapid response brigade on the border with Russia, increasing its military budget and even adopting the experience of Ukrainian soldiers.
U.S. shutdown? Republicans and Democrats once again failed to agree on the budget. Military aid to Ukraine is hanging by a thread. The Ukrainian armed forces risk being left without weapons at a critical moment. How else does the political crisis in the U.S. play into the Kremlin's hands? All the details are in the following report.
The first shutdown in 7 years. The U.S. government has partially shut down. About 750,000 federal employees will be furloughed indefinitely or will have to work without pay. Every day the government is idle will cost America approximately $400 million. The whole mess is due to budget conflicts between Republicans and Democrats. They couldn't reach an agreement on how to allocate the federal budget, particularly regarding taxation and healthcare. Simply put, the Democrats demanded an extension of medical benefits for 24 million Americans, as well as increased subsidies for the sector. The Republicans saw these demands as pandering to voters and refused to make any concessions. The icing on the cake of these already difficult negotiations was this video. After an unproductive meeting with the Democrats, the president of the superpower posted this on his social media.
If we provide all these illegal immigrants with free health care, we might be able to win them over to our side, and they could vote for us.
In this video, created with artificial intelligence in Sombrero and Susami, is the House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries. And the fake voice is supposedly that of Senator Chuck Schumer. Trump was accused of racism, and his party, although it controls both chambers of Congress, does not have enough votes to pass the spending bill and did not receive support from the Democrats. As a result, the Senate rejected the short-term funding bill that would have kept the government running.
The Senate session is adjourned until 10 a.m. tomorrow.
While party representatives point fingers at each other, journalists are clarifying how the shutdown will affect the lives of ordinary Americans and visitors to the country. For example, the U.S. Department of Transportation has already announced that more than 11,000 Federal Aviation Administration employees will be placed on forced leave. And more than 13,000 air traffic controllers will be working without pay. And that's despite the fact that the industry is already short about 4,000 of these employees. Which means air travel will slow down.
The U.S. Travel Association, which represents airlines, hotels, car rental companies, and other tourism businesses, stated that a partial shutdown of the federal government will cost the country's tourism sector about $1 billion per week.
This is already the 15th government shutdown since 1981. The longest one in U.S. history lasted 35 days, from December 2018 to January 2019, during Trump's first term. At that time, Republicans and Democrats argued over funding for the construction of a wall on the border with Mexico. And although politicians are painting a bleak future, political scientists believe they are exaggerating.
These financial shutdowns seem to be on the edge, but a wealthy country like the United States can't really be on the edge given its leadership in economic, political, and military terms. It's a kind of theater that lawmakers constantly put on together with the president. In short, it may look like everything is tough, but in the end, I'll let you in on a secret. There's always a happy ending. They'll allow a few more $1 trillion to be printed, and everyone will be happy. That's why right now, when it comes to money in the US, we approach things very quietly or even take a pause altogether, because talking about money will just irritate them. We definitely need to hold off for a week, let them negotiate.
Globally and significantly, according to analysts, the shutdown overseas won't have a major impact on Ukraine or its ability to resist Russian aggression. In particular, this is also because after taking office in the Oval Office, Donald Trump shifted the financial burden in this area onto the Europeans. And the expenses for aid to the Ukrainian army that the US provides are all part of long-standing agreements for the fiscal year, which is coming to an end.
Ukraine and Hungary are on the brink of disaster. Kyiv and Budapest have become embroiled in a diplomatic war. Tensions are rising by the day. Ukraine and Hungary are trading serious accusations. What this will mean for both sides, find out right now.
A provocation in Moscow's favor, personal interests at play, or simply the result of unskilled drone operators. In Hungary, after several days, instead of explaining what their drones were doing in Ukrainian airspace, they chose the familiar Kremlin tactic of, "We're not there."
Admitting this publicly, of course, is not in the Hungarian government's interest, not in interest.
However, the story of the Hungarian drone in Ukraine is only gaining momentum, with more and more facts emerging.
One drone has been recorded and there is corresponding movement. By the way, I asked to show this to people because they say we're making things up.
In response, there was a statement from official Budapest claiming that Zelensky is seeing ghosts and that there was no drone at all. To this, our Ministry of Foreign Affairs responded not just with an accusation, but with a confirmed route of the Hungarian UAV, demanding an explanation for what had happened.
For the blind Hungarian officials, here is the exact route of yesterday's drone incursion from Hungary into Ukrainian airspace. Our armed forces have gathered all the necessary evidence, and we are still waiting for an explanation from Hungary as to what this object was doing in our airspace.
At the same time, our military and analysts have provided their own explanations. So, according to one version, Hungary may have staged this provocation as a way to somehow take revenge on Ukraine for the sabotage of the Druzhba oil pipeline. Moreover, not without advice from their partner on the other side of the pipeline. I
strongly suspect that Orban is simply copying Putin's tactics. Just as Putin is now launching drones against Western countries, this first happened against Poland, and now we see unidentified drones flying over some northern countries. Denmark, Norway, Sweden. They've been spotted in northern France, and no one can figure out what these drones are or where they're coming from.
At the same time, another Russian connection in this story was uncovered by investigative journalists. Hungarian media controlled by Orban and Russian Foreign Ministry spokesperson Maria Zakharova made almost identical statements just a few hours apart. They claimed that, in response to the drone incursion, Ukraine would now send its own drones to Europe, specifically to Romania and Poland. However, these drones will actually be Russian, assembled from parts of downed Shaheds in Ukraine. In other words, if something happens in the West involving Russian drones, just know in advance, it was Kiev.
Judging by
the way the propaganda is being presented, they're trying to downplay their own threats.
Then I wouldn't rule out the possibility of some serious attack. I saw a review of how they conduct their
work on social media. So Russian bots are pushing the idea not that people need to defend themselves, so that Ukraine receives less support, and they downplay the danger of these attacks. Therefore, this could mean that they are preparing something more serious.
Another theory as to why a Niger drone ended up in Ukraine is simply reconnaissance work in Moscow's interests.
Many military experts note that in this way, reconnaissance information is collected, which is simply transmitted or sold to Moscow. Unfortunately, this is also possible.
And unfortunately, there is already indirect evidence of this. After all, following a recent similar incident during a subsequent Russian shelling, the strike was delivered specifically to Zakarpattia.
There is already
confirmed evidence that they had previously violated the airspace of Ukraine. If it is proven that at that time they directed a strike in Zakarpattia at an American company that was producing coffee machines there, well, I think Trump's praise for Orban will change, and he will definitely have to answer for it.
Zelensky also noted that such reconnaissance activity along the route of the Hungarian drone is highly suspicious. He refrained from making direct accusations, but there were still hints that everyone in Kyiv understands what's going on.
It's very important what they are studying. It is very important what the Hungarian intelligence officer is studying on the territory of Ukraine. Basically, I understand and I believe that they are doing very dangerous things. Very dangerous things first and foremost for themselves.
So what about the main culprit of the celebration? After the verbal spat between our foreign ministries, Viktor Orban also decided to make a statement. Although it would have been better if he had just...
They remained completely silent, choosing to keep their thoughts and feelings entirely to themselves, without uttering a single word. By the way, I just wanted to mention...
It should be added that without EU support, Hungary wouldn't have even gotten on its feet. For years now, the Orban regime has existed solely thanks to subsidies from the European Union. And the more provocations come from Budapest, the higher the chances that Hungary will be left without this support.
That's all for now. And for more breaking news from the front, tune in to the next episode.